If you want to jump in the middle.
You have no idea. Mr. Sopko is in charge to start.
Okay.
And then we'll, I think, lead off with you making your remarks. I'll kind of Barak comment, open it up.
Yeah.
I think this is a paper that we should be able to get some
I hope so.
response.
Yeah, I'm giving it up. It's been a lot of fun. So, can I just take the podium for the 15, 20 minutes or so?
Right. Is that fine?
That should be fine.
Good. I think. No?
She said it's just
Well, you're wearing one, though, right?
just ornament. Yeah, she put one on me even though there's one there. So I guess it's for internet
All right.
purposes.
Well, I think we're going to get started. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Sopko. I'm Vice President of the Sports and Entertainment Law Society. We would like to thank you for coming out to the beauty of bets, wagers as compensation for professional athletes. We are proud to present our distinguished panel, which is comprised of Professor Jeffrey Standen of the Willamette University College of Law, as well as Duke's own Professors Haagen and Richman. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel.
Good afternoon. I want to first thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you to Mike Sopko and the Duke Law, Entertainment and Sports Law Society for inviting me. The paper, I brought a bunch of reprints but left them in my room, but it's available on my website and on SSRN and so forth if you want to look at a copy. The paper, as the title indicates, conducts a little bit of a thought experiment, asking just why do the professional leagues have prohibitions against professional athletes betting on themselves, betting on their performance. I will note as I introduce the topic that a lot of leagues a lot of tournament sports don't prohibit betting, in essence. Tournament golf, tennis, NASCAR, kind of popular around here, horse racing, right? These are sports that essentially work like bets, where the sponsor will put a pool of money out there and the players compete for it. In fact, in some of the lower or minor leagues, so to speak, of tournament sports, such as mini tours in the golf field, players there essentially do play for their bets. Each player will post an entry fee that's just quite substantial, and then pool the money. There's really no other money, and they play for it. So we do have betting regimes in some sports, what I'll call tournament sports, individual sports, but pretty much universally we do not see any of the league sports, the sports that are vertically integrated, where the teams, the franchises come together, form leagues, or leagues form franchises, doesn't really matter, and run their own events, like Major League Baseball or NFL or NBA, which are integrated sports. And there, in those sports, in those league sports, we don't see betting permitted. Basically, for a few sources for that prohibition, I'll review them very quickly. The commissioners of the leagues have always claimed an inherent power to police what they call the integrity of competition, and have used that as a fulcrum to prohibit wagering by players either on their own games, by players on other contests within their league, and some commissioners even on players betting at all on other sporting events. No leagues today absolutely prohibit players from gambling per se on card games or what have you. Also, the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements in professional sports also sound that integrity theme, if you will. And some of them, the NFL particularly, actually has a clause that prohibits players from gambling, from betting on their games. Other sports don't have that language, but The CBAs are, when they allude to the integrity, that's understood to be a gambling prohibition. And then finally, in a related note, the leagues also have many, and some of them quite detailed, compensation limitations. Players are, of course, paid by contract, paid by salary, but they are not, by and large, allowed to be paid or compensated or given a bonus for team game outcomes. Kind of strange, perhaps, that first thought, but players can't be paid to win, only paid by contract. And that's compensation limitations that actually appear sometimes in the CBAs, but also in the bylaws of the leagues themselves. The leagues prohibit each other, the teams do, from compensating their players for bonus. There are some leagues that permit individual performance bonuses. Some of those are, but the performance bonuses are strictly circumscribed in the amount, but also in the nature of the bonus. Players cannot be paid for winning games. They can be given bonuses, however, for number of games played, innings pitched, things like that, but not on outcomes. The only exception there is kind of notable is the new CBA, collective bargaining agreement, CBA for the NHL, hockey. And the new NHL CBA has page after page of permissible bonuses, and including such things as number of shorthanded goals or being on the ice when the other team prevents scoring, and goalies for shutouts and stuff like that. So the NHL is forward or backward, whatever you want to call it, in allowing for compensation based on outcomes. But the leagues prohibit, by and large, generally speaking, prohibit such performance-based bonuses for teams based on winning and losing because of the fear that it would be akin to gambling, paying on the outcome. Now, one exception, the MLB, Major League Baseball, will and does give, and NFL too, does give team bonuses for division titles, conference titles, or league titles rather, and World Series. Okay. So anyway, that's a little bit of a background, and as I said, I want to ask the question, sort of a thought experiment. Why not change the regime? Why not have a more of a free market, if you will, allowing teams players rather to bet? And I think if we did, just indulging the hypothesis for a minute, if we did it, betting would perhaps ameliorate some of the problems we see today in professional sports. One of the primary problems we see is I characterize as agency costs. Players who are selfish, okay, who won't, I'll use basketball today, we're in basketball country here at Duke, and players who won't pass the ball, rather take shots, even if shots are at times ill-advised. Think Allen Iverson, okay? And I like Allen Iverson, but he does shoot a lot, okay? Or my favorite, Paul Pierce. A lot of shots, but a lot of bad ones too. Why won't Allen Iverson pass the ball? And
He went 6 for 22 last night.
okay, well, he's passing pretty well then, thank you. And why won't he pass the ball? And
the Sixers win.
there's
Nobody else can shoot in the team.
my rebuttal. Okay. It may well be. We'll talk about that later if we can, that some players actually are better off shooting even when they're bad shots because they're good at creating shots. But we'll look at that. But anyway, a number of studies has over the years, really, this is not news, has shown that, again, using NBA, that players are compensated for their scoring. In other words, Paul Pierce, Allen Iverson have every incentive to shoot and shoot all the time. That even percentage shooting doesn't hurt one's salary, passing, assists, rebounds, diving for that loose ball. None of these things, statistically speaking, factor into salary. That salary is overwhelmingly determined by one's scoring average. So under the current salary regime of contracts and guaranteed contracts in most sports and yearly contracts, players have significant agency problems. In other words, they want to shoot, and the shooting may not always help the team win. And it's hard. It's very hard for teams in the NBA, for example, to compensate players for those little things, as the announcers talk about, diving for the ball or setting a screen, whatever. I think managers look for those when they set salaries, but I think it's hard for them to detect them. But they must not be, because again, scoring determines salary in a very strong way. And so one advantage of paying players not on the basis of salary or partially on salary or not on guaranteed contracts, but on game outcomes, is that it perfectly aligns player incentives with team incentives. players won't get paid unless the team wins. So therefore, even a shooter who loves to shoot like Allen Iverson will pass the ball to a better shooter or a more open teammate. At least they'll have incentives to do so, because doing so will help the team win. Players will ideally take themselves out of games if a better teammate sits on the bench. Players will help the manager, right, align team incentives to further the team goal of winning. In fact, under a betting regime, the selfish player would not be the one who shoots too much. The selfish player would be the one who refuses to participate in the team bet. Because by refusing to bet on his team, he signals to his teammates that he's not going to try as hard as they are, and that doesn't care perhaps as much as they do about winning. So betting helps get everyone on the same page. If you play golf, and golf is commonly, wagers are made there, you don't care who sinks the winning putt. As long as the putt goes in, you get paid. Second aspect that I talk about with betting is that betting helps overcome some of the integrity issues that I alluded to earlier that we see in the professional leagues today. Now, I mentioned the CBA, the history of the leagues, court cases, all refer to the gambling prohibitions as based on integrity, that the leagues want to ensure the integrity, the competitive integrity of the contest. And so I wonder what is really meant. So no one really explains that. What is meant by integrity? And the answer, I guess, is what? We want players trying really, really hard to win, right? We don't want them under-trying, so to speak, which they might with agency costs. They might shoot too much to pad their scoring totals. But we don't, in a strange way, want them over-trying either. You see, in other words, competitive integrity means we want the players trying just hard enough to win, but not going all out. Now, that sounds crazy on first blush. Why not go all out? Well, think of a manager. Say a manager well, think of the Game 7 of the World Series, and we go to baseball. Game 7 of the World Series, right? That manager of the team is going to use every resource he can to help bring about victory, right? The starting pitchers, the stars will come in from the bullpen. The guy who pitched yesterday will come in again today. You know, players who are a little bit injured, they'll go in the game. There's no tomorrow, right? And that manager will expend all resources to win that Game 7. Now, what about an early season game? A game that's happening in April or June, right? Well, the guy who has a little nagging hamstring injury, put him on the bench. Let him rest for a week to get him healthy, right? The pitcher, he pitched yesterday. Give him a couple days off. Bring my starters in to pitch? No, this is not Game 7 of the World Series. In other words, I will only try so hard to win that June game compared to how hard I'll try to win the World Series game. Or the NFL coaches are a good example, how they'll hold back certain defensive schemes or offensive trick plays until the right moment later in the season where the fake punt, whatever, will have maximum value. You see? So, and players are the same way too, right? They'll rest at some point for the big game late in the year. They're on the field. Even a little injury or a Band-Aid on their toe, get them in there, right? Because the game is so important. So players have what's called in resource economics called a reservation price. Managers have it. Everyone has it. In other words, I want to save some of the resource, my energies, my health, whatever, for future games, right? I don't want to blow it all on the preseason game where the starters barely go in there, wave to the fans, and come back out, right? It's preseason. We don't want to get the big guy injured, okay? And so the players want to save some for the future. The managers want to save some. In other words, it's a season, not a game, okay? And so when we say competitive integrity in that June game, go all out, guys, but only with, keeping in mind that we're going to need you in July, August, and September. Don't go crashing into that wall, outfielder, right? Or don't play with that nagging injury, Allen Iverson, whatever, because we're going to need you down the road. Okay, so integrity means, in part, strangely, that we want players to think about their resource, and managers to be sure. Okay, and the problem today, under current salary compensation schemes, is that all the players are on different pages. There's, think of the NFL. There's the rookie who's trying to make the team in preseason, going all out, flying around the field, sacrificing his body. Why? Because he has no reservation price. In other words, there is no future for him. This is Game 7 of the World Series. He'll go crazy to make the team. Once he makes the team, starts settling back a little bit, has that longer-term perspective, everyone wonders, what happened to that energy we saw? What happened to that going all-out craziness? The answer is, well, I got a contract. Or the big NBA star. I'm a Celtics fan, and Mark Blount, a center for the team a couple years ago, right, was a hustling, crazy, throw his body around kind of guy, gets the big 6 or 7 year contract with the large down payment, and suddenly he's got a reservation price. Everyone's calling him lazy. Was he lazy? No. He was rationally responding to economic incentives. The incentive is, what? I got a 7-year deal now. The team wants me here, good, healthy, for 7 years. I better save a little bit, lay back a little bit. So the players, or the veterans, and all people who are in contract years going all out, people with the long-term contracts going less than all out. The point is, under current regimes, every player is on a different page in terms of his incentives. Now, you wipe those contracts out and let compensation happen, or at least partially happen, whatever, through a betting regime, through game outcomes. Suddenly, player incentives are much more easy to align. It's much more straightforward for managers or owners to put everybody on the same page. Everyone wants to win today's bet in light of the possibility of winning future bets. You see? And by varying the size of the bet, the owner can vary the efforts of the players. Just by putting a pool out there, right? Tiger Woods shows up for the big multi-zillion-dollar tournaments, not for the little, BC Classic, whatever, in upstate New York. But yeah, get him out there for some big FedEx tournament. He's going to be there. Why? Well, a lot of reasons why, but one of it is the tournament. The money for the tournament draws out the best players, and so the owners can also can control the reservation prices of the managers, of the players, by varying the team bet according to the importance of the game. Even I want to move forward, but even the managers can even supplement bonus payments or betting payments with salary. Say you have a team that's losing, right? The veterans are getting annoyed. They want to win the money. You can give them a little salary, pay them half their salary. Why do that? Well, it changes their reservation price so that what? So that they'll let the rookies come in and learn how to play. They're less concerned about winning that game now because they're going to get some guaranteed money. You see? So therefore, if the team's losing, we can develop the young guys. I'll sit back a little bit and let it happen. Okay. And finally, I want to leave lots of time for comments and questions. Just a couple other thoughts here. But finally, get to the question that you're all going to have, right? What about cheaters? What about shirking? Right? Why won't the players get together and fix a game, or fix a game, intend to lose, right? Or even to intend to win, but within some point spread or within a proper margin, or throw the game or trade off on their inside information. Basically scandalize gambling, scandalize sports rather. And the answer, I guess, could take a minute here or two, but well, first of all, why don't players do that today? I mean, I know the easy answer is, well, there's a rule against it, but rules against lots of things, okay? But why don't players today cheat or shirk, or maybe they do, but why don't they gamble anyway? And a large reason, I suspect, along with, of course, the rules and social stigma, perhaps, that might attach, is that the players' salaries and contracts create a large performance bond. That if Tom Brady is playing poorly this year on purpose, maybe he is, I don't know, but if he's doing that, then, I guess if he's doing it on purpose and it's discovered, he could forfeit his contract, forfeit his future earnings in the field. So that, and the money's big, as you may have noticed. And so the performance bond that the salaries set and create help, I think, create strong incentives for players not to cheat, not to break the rules. Well, the same performance bond would be available under a betting regime as well. The players wouldn't be forfeiting guaranteed contracts, but they would forfeit the chance to participate in future team winnings. There's a lot of money in professional sports, as we know, and that would be forfeited just as much. The fact that their salary might come from a different source really wouldn't change any of their incentives to obey any rules. So it could well be, if we wanted to, in my thought experiment, maintain a rule that prohibited players from betting against their own team with the performance bond that I've mentioned. But I would go further. Even if there were no rule, I think it'd be very difficult for players to actually make shirking bets, to lose or to shave points or whatever. It'd be very hard to do that. It could happen, and it could happen today. I mean, there have been scandals through our history, right? Black Sox scandal being the most famous of them. But remember, those scandals all happened during regimes in which gambling was prohibited, right? So it could happen. I guess players could connive to throw a game. But first of all, it'd be very hard to get the betting public or someone to take the other side of that bet, right? If Tom Brady wanted to bet you, say, I bet I'm going to throw an interception today, you say, I'm not going to take that bet, Tom, right? Because he has it within his control to throw incompletions or throw the ball away or what have you. So it'd be very hard. It'd be like playing golf and betting against yourself. I'll bet myself to lose. Who would take that? for any kind of sizable money. You never would. Why? Because it's too easy. It's easy to lose. It's hard to win. So it'd be hard to get that taken. It'd also be hard to even trade on inside information. If Tom Brady, staying with him, had a injured shoulder one week, we'll say, right, it wasn't going to play, that's lucrative information. Under today's regime, it's very valuable to know that and get that information to the betting public, right? To have that inside information is very valuable if you're the only one who knows, okay? But under a betting regime, as soon as Tom feels a little tweak in his shoulder, the linemen are calling their bookmakers, and the trainers and the coaches and the owners are all changing their bets. The market's going to know very quickly, even if proxies are somehow used, the market's going to know that Tom's shoulder is hurting him some, and therefore the value of that information will go way down. So there won't be that $1 million payday from being the only person in America who knows that Tom Brady's shoulder is sore. And I would add, and I'll shut up here in a minute, but we don't see fixes in golf. I'll go back to golf. I mean, maybe we do. Maybe Greg Norman hits the ball over there on purpose or something back in the Masters, or maybe it was that Jean Van de Velde really was not being done, but was just playing to a bet. But I don't think so. We haven't heard of that, right? And so golf is very much in control of one player. I mean, for the Patriots to lose on purpose, right, it would take some concerted action. Maybe Brady could do it alone, but it would take some concerted action to really make it all happen. But in golf, for Tiger Woods to hit a ball to the right, I mean, no one's ever going to know that he turned his hands or whatever on purpose. So golf would be like very amenable to shirking bets, and we just don't see it. So I have a few other points to make. I think even the idea of point spreads would go away. Teams would have every incentive to equalize themselves. Lots of studies show when you have heavy favorites, and it's very hard for the heavy favorites to get much action, right? Teams want action. That's how they're going to get paid. So teams have every incentive to create parity all by themselves. You don't need a salary cap. 100% of the bet's the cap, right? But if all the good players are on one team, who's going to take that bet? Very hard to make that bet. So the teams will trade players among each other to equalize teams, like you and I would in a pickup game, right? Trading players back and forth. Why? Because equalized teams make for large bets. They facilitate gambling action. That's how they get paid. And so all the parity rules we see in the leagues, the draft order rule, the rule on compensation limitations, the rule on equalized or imbalanced schedules, et cetera, salary caps, right, would all theoretically anyway go away. And even finally, I think we could even see happy side bets, which I think would be great. I'll stop. I think I'd love to see some side bets. Like I would love, like say you have a blowout game, NBA, the Celtics are beating anybody, I don't really care, the Lakers, okay? They're killing the Lakers, that's good. Yeah, they're beating the Lakers in the fourth quarter by 30 points. Well, today's NBA, what happens? The game's over, Paul Pierce takes a rest, Kobe Bryant sits down, everyone's relaxing while some rookies you don't heard about go in the game. Who wants to see that and pay $60 a ticket? Wouldn't it be great if Paul Pierce and Kobe Bryant had a side bet going as to who was going to score more points? And they're in there in the fourth quarter, game's over. But there's a side bet going on. You play golf, you know what I'm talking about. There's side bets, right? And they're in there going gung-ho, fourth quarter. Players are setting screens for them, playing all out. So you can win that side bet. Side bets would happen consistent with the overall team bet, just like golf, So lots of fun. Hope you brought your money. We'll take some action. So anyway, a few thoughts, and I know we have some comments and questions, so I'll open it up to other people. I think Professor Richman's going to be up, or Professor Haagen. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, the business about the Celtics beating anybody with a counterfactual, is that?
Law school hypothetical.
Or law school hypothetical. Professor Richman, I think, will make some initial comments, particularly, I guess, as an economist. But
Well, yeah. I'll be very brief. So I have 5 points. I think they're in descending order of importance or even feasibility. The nature of this debate is actually becoming quite clear. It's not a difference in application of economic principles or even philosophical approach to betting. This is a debate between Celtics fans and Sixers fans. And I think the Sixers fans have the better argument here. All right, so what do we have? We have 5 points. The first 2, I think, are fairly convincing. The last 3 are near unconvincing, but I kind of think they're cute, so I want to make them anyway. The first argument is this. All right, so what exactly is the nature of Professor Standen's argument? He's exactly right that betting is widely prohibited. There are a number of different sources of that prohibition, the league rules, the collective bargaining agreements, the individual contracts between the players and the owners. But what is the nature of his argument? Is he saying that these rules are suboptimal? Is he saying that the makers of these rules are somehow misinformed? Because that's very different from making a freedom of contract argument or really an advocacy of a free market. Because this is a free market. These are parties who have decided that it's in their own best interests to prohibit players from engaging in bets. And as we understand from rudimentary contracts theory, if there's a certain item, a certain freedom that the player is giving up, that is factored into his or her compensation. So these parties have all come together and have figured out that we can maximize our collective value if we include these prohibitions. Just like Jeff Kent is not allowed to ride his motorcycle, he's also not allowed to bet on his team. Now, from that perspective, we have a free market. These prohibitions are a product of the free market. That means that Professor Standen's burden is really quite significant. He's not talking about some antiquated social norm that's no longer socially optimal. He's talking about very sophisticated people in a very, very lucrative business who are not pursuing their own interests. I would suspect that these guys are really smart and know what they're doing. And they're developing these prohibitions for wealth maximizing reasons. So that's that's the first point. The first point is, this is not an argument about how free the market should be. This is the free market. And we have to find some flaw in the market if, in fact, the parties in this market are not doing what's best for themselves. Now, the second point. The second point is about integrity. A lot of Professor Standen's paper it challenges the notion that what the parties are really doing, particularly the league is doing, is advancing the integrity of the game. I am in full agreement with him here. It is not about the integrity of the game. It is about money. Now, these are wealth maximizing entrepreneurs. They buy the teams not to preserve the spirit of the game, although of course they certainly have to be attracted to the nature of the game. Widget manufacturers have to like widgets to really be good at it. But they're wealth maximizers. And they're very, very good at doing what they're doing. I mean, you look at the number of Duke caps in the room here. I mean, that's because Duke is very good at maximizing its name brand. We see all these teams pursuing very sophisticated, very clever, very creative revenue opportunities. So with that as a presumption, if these guys know how to make money, then we should assume, I think correctly, that they, much better than us at this table, know what rules will maximize their value. So all of the arguments, all the potential problems that Professor Standen brings up, the agency problem, the incentive problems, the timing problems, this is where he analogizes it to reservation economics. Those are all problems that these players and managers and owners are very familiar with. And they structure their contracts accordingly. And they structure league rules accordingly to make sure that those problems aren't severe. So I guess related to the first point, the first point is this is the free market, and the second point is we think the players in the free market, the experts within the free market, know what they're doing. All right. Now for the other 3 points. Point number 3 is there's no I in team argument. Well, there is no I in team argument. There is no I in team. And actually, there's no I in argument either, come to think of it.
There's no we either.
There's no we in either word.
There isn't win.
We, I guess that's right, yeah. I lost my train of thought. Oh, right, of course, there's no I in team. I can't think of any bet that any player would make that is fully consistent with the interests of the team. I can't think of any. Even a bet that says, I think my team is going to win, I think is inconsistent with the interests of the team. Because what is winning about is not about winning a bet, it's about a team effort. And any deviation from that is that's an additional agency cost. That's not the correction of an agency cost. Now, Professor Standen brings up a lot of hypotheticals where that might not be the case, and I guess I just don't buy them. At least I think there are counter arguments to all of them. I think that the introduction of the bet would bring suspicions and would be more likely to create team dissension than team harmony. I could be wrong about this. He could be wrong about this. There's no empirical evidence about this, but that essentially brings me back to my first 2 points, which is that if there is an agency problem, I think that the team owners and the team managers and the league managers are best at solving that. The 4th point, this is what I call the Charles Barkley point. Last year at this forum, I had a Charles Barkley point, and I feel like every year I do this, I need to have some kind of Charles Barkley point. So here's my Charles Barkley point. Charles Barkley has lost $10 million in bets. That is a subsidiary to the Charles Daly point, who has lost $50 million in bets. Now, I mean, I would say it's a bad thing. I would say that at the very least, if you're talking about players betting, if you're talking about players who are relatively young, who are all of a sudden thrust with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of responsibility and a whole lot of pressure, we at least have to think about the possibility that they would crack under the pressure, and that gambling could be much more of a problem than an added incentive to do well. We see players making bad investments all the time in stupid restaurant ideas and the like. And I would say that's actually an indication of a larger problem that we should be much more aware of preventing from spreading rather than facilitating its spread. And the 5th point, this is the Celtics point, or I should say the Marc Blount point. Any observation, any event, any detail that contributes to the Celtics' demise, which I believe is now fairly complete, I'm all in favor of. So let's continue to disincentivize the Celtics players and keep them where they are.
I will add one or 2 points and then let you respond. Okay. Because I'm a historian, not an economist, I would tend to put these things in historical terms and call on Edmund Burke, but it's essentially the same point as Professor Richman's. Given that none of the leagues have any interest in going in this direction. And when I have discussed this kind of issue with people in the leagues, they show no interest in it. Given that they can set their salary structures, if GMs are miswriting contracts, they're doing it for whatever good reasons they've got. Largely a reinforcement of Professor Richman's point, there is a very high burden to show that there's market failure here, given the nature of the market and given the consistency of the response. Now, I want to add 2 very small points, because I think this is probably really where we want to join issue. You noted that if Brady had a slightly injured shoulder, that all of a sudden the market would know things about that, as the various linemen. Teddy Bruschi is now reducing his bet. There are whole sorts of other information going out into the marketplace. But of course, one of the things that teams want to do is hide information and value disinformation. That's part of the sporting activity. It's one of the reasons you don't let people into practices. You are required to disclose certain things but not other things. And you might get, far from optimal information, you might get information which is quite inconsistent with the way in which we traditionally understand the purposes of information. The last is to reinforce the Charles Barkley point. I think it's the Art Schlichter point. Because Schlichter really did get himself into very serious trouble, and Schlichter almost certainly was engaging in integrity kinds of issues, so that is not completely off the table, although I think you correctly and effectively in the paper say this is a comparative problem. It's not that you're saying it's not there, but it may be less if we allow betting. The last point, there are radically different interpersonal incentives in team sports and in single competitions. And so I'm not sure where those analogies go, but that's a... All right.
Me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, great comments and a lot to think about here. Yeah, I'm not sure I have answers, but I have a few thoughts and throw them out there, see what happens. Yeah, I think I think the basic arguments as I heard them is an argument sort of that what is good, which is one I tend to favor too.
What is profit maximizing.
Okay, right. I'll go with that. And I think there are some significant reasons why we have the betting prohibition. First of all, my research, and I kind of outlined this in the paper, shows that the gambling prohibition is a bit of an historical artifact, that it's a morals-based prohibition. I have not presented the paper, but I've had every general manager in one professional league read the paper, and I know a few of them, and all swore to secrecy, so I won't say who. But to a person, they said, well, if we could only do something like this, if we could structure our incentives somehow, not use betting as a fun example, but we could just do it through tournament-style payoffs. If we could pay players for team victories, even to allow significant bonuses for that, would go so far to helping us corral these wayward millionaires to take the Band-Aid off their little toe and get in the game. You see? So I think, this is just anecdotal, but I think there would be, the rule, the prohibition is a bit of an artifact. I think it will go away in various ways, maybe not flat out betting, but it will go away, the prohibitions that limit styles of compensation. I think the leagues too, we give them too much credit sometimes. The leagues are not doing Caldor Hicks efficient things. They're not maximizing profit in the way that perhaps that Professor Richman is discussing. I think they're individual mom and pop operations by and large. Look at Major League Baseball. How long did it take that league to get a franchise in Washington, D.C.? Even though everyone knew it was going to be a great market, but one person, the GM the owner rather of the Orioles, was able to say no, and for decades say no. You see, so the leagues are not operating on that level of a single firm. They are Parisian. They do require not unanimity, but sometimes pretty close to unanimity to move. With franchise relocation, it is a consent of the nearby owners. You see, so they're structured that way on purpose, and there's pros and cons to that. But I think there's a lot of rules that could be changed that would make them even more money than they make today. So I think there might well be. I understand. You're right. I'm arguing counterfactually. It's always a proper burden for me to bear, because they're not doing it and they're not stupid. So why not? And I think they would. I think they have a large joint action problem, really. What else could I say? I'll skip all the Celtics digs for now. But I'm losing. There was a number of points made, and I'm losing some of them a little bit. As far as the idea of one of Professor Richman's points about losing money or about not transfer, I have a note here, but it doesn't make much sense to me. But anyway, I wanted to say that, whatever I'm going to say on the paper, I wanted to say that allowing wagers would allow the poor market teams, the so-called small market teams, access to the capital markets. Would be allowed to solve some of their financial troubles. You see, less and less of the money of the players' salaries would have to come from local fan base, from the ticket prices, right? In other words, all the teams, even the Kansas City Royals, could partake in those national capital markets to finance their teams. So, so we would overcome a lot of those kind of concerns. The salaries wouldn't increase. Probably, maybe it would if there really is an efficiency effect. But more of the salary would be drawn from bet payoffs, from tournaments, if you will, instead of from local fan bases. Let's see. Yeah, and the final point. There's others, but I don't know what I'm saying here. But a final point on the information of Tom Brady's shoulder we're worried about this morning, and under the current regime, right, there's the most incentive possible for Tom Brady not to disclose his shoulder, to call up some friend of a friend and place a huge bet on the Patriots to lose, and he can make a ton of money because information is like cocaine. It's illegal, unless it's disclosed publicly to be out there. And so
It's also addictive and dangerous.
okay, yeah. Oh, I want to talk about that. Good. That reminds me. Thank you. Under a betting regime where the players are going to be disclosing information, or other bettors, or the coaches or managers will be disclosing that information more quickly because they all have incentives, the value of the marginal value of each bet would go way down, and the inside information analogy wouldn't be so pronounced. There wouldn't be as much value in something that was legalized. Oh, and finally, my final point. I want to let everyone else chip in here, but on John Daly and Charles Barkley and Charles Daly, who's someone I don't know about, but anyway, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's okay. Gambling can be a problem. I will mention that it probably is not a problem for these guys. They make a ton of money, but even assuming it is, I think they lost their money betting on other stuff, right? Not on sports. And so, problem gamblers will always be with us, and maybe entertainers, maybe actors, and other people, celebrities, have problems playing poker or gambling, whatever that we could know about. I don't read the newspapers to know enough about that, but lots of people even people who have money can have problem gambling habits. I'm not sure how that necessarily cuts into sports. I guess the fear is that John Daly will get in trouble with the gamblers and will bet against himself to lose the tournament. That'd be like the worst thing, right? To try to make back that money to pay off the gamblers. Well, his incentives are strong right now, to do that. If he's close enough to win a tournament and then backs off that last day to pay off, he could do that now. Whereas if his bets were more overt, more transparent under a betting regime, it'd be much harder for him to make that bet. Plus, it's going to be very hard, and back in the team sports, very hard for players to bet against their teams because the other players are going to know. Everyone's going to participate in team bets, either as a team, collectively, if the owner wants to control the incentives, or players could do it on their own. It doesn't really matter, but we can talk about if it matters, but I don't think it does. But, so you're already putting $10,000 down on the victory. So you have to go beyond that to bet against yourself, you see? So to me, the choices are always comparative. And if you're worried about players betting to shirk, I think the worries are less under a gambling regime.
There's one other thing I'd just like to get you to address before we open it up to everybody else. The problems that you were seeking to solve were all problems that are associated with various kinds of long-term agreements, protection of players for non-performance, basically. Now, players in sports that you note allow various kinds of betting. Whenever they're in a position to do it, try to protect guaranteed earnings. So one thing that you're doing, even assuming all of this would work, it is directly opposed to what the players perceive to be their interests. Because every time they're in a position to do it, they go for guaranteed money, long agreements,
right?
Protection, disassociation of result from individual or team performance.
Not sure that's always the case, but with unions in operation, it is. That's right. And it may well be that under a betting regime, teams would have different styles. The Yankees would attract players who have great perhaps risk preferences. Other teams might attract risk avoiders. And so the risk avoiding teams could collect players who want to insure their against their winnings, or adopt hedge strategies or whatever, right? Or straddle the darn game if you really want to guarantee some money. Now you won't make as much. That's why you're playing for Kansas City Royals, and you and your fellow babies can all play on that team, adopt hedge or insurance strategies to guarantee to lock in smaller wages. Now, if you really want to get rich, then you'll play for a different firm. So firms can take their own position in the market and can acquire players, or players will go to them because those teams adopt more aggressive trading strategies to maximize their high end of their bets. If that answers it. one other thought. I thought you were saying something else at first, but I do. It's a great point. If I think in part you're bringing this up, and that is that players, and the worry is one worry is that players. I thought you were going to say, and maybe you were, that players even during the game, if the team has a 7-point lead or whatever, and protecting it, and say it's near the halftime of an NFL game, team's ahead, the coach on the sideline calls for the Hail Mary pass, right? And the quarterback might say, coach said Hail Mary, but we have a 7-point lead. I got a lot of money on this game. No, I'm going to throw that one out of bounds or whatever, because it was me against the team, right? The player might do that. Well, there's always that possibility. There's that possibility today because now quarterbacks today are compensated in part or negatively compensated for their interceptions. And so players today have worries about throwing the Hail Mary pass because it does tend to easily add an interception. Okay, and I've had one person, an NFL, not an owner, but a coordinator, but tell me that's an endemic problem in the league is to try to get your darn quarterback to throw the Hail Mary pass. And the leagues, the coaches know which players will do it and which won't. I won't say who, but other than Peyton Manning won't throw one, right? Because I'm not going to do that. Now Tom Brady, he'll do what the coaches say. So he'll throw. He's more. I don't know. He's raised right. He's more team oriented. But the point I'm saying is we have those problems already. Because go back to basketball, which is every player's got to know this. If they don't, the agent's going to tell them that compensation correlates incredibly with scoring average. So to tell the player, to tell Allen Iverson, pass the ball, please. It's like you're telling me to lose money. You're telling me to take less salary, in essence, if he's in a contract year. So it's a very hard road to hoe, whatever the phrase is. I should get that right here in North Carolina, but it's very hard to figure this out. Okay, why players, will players disobey their coaches? I think they do now. So it's comparative choice.
Questions?
That Pittman doesn't have to throw Hail Mary passes because he's good enough to drive down the field.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Just a point. But I was just wondering, you made a statement about how betting a team could help small market teams compete. But I was just wondering how that's kind of accomplished by revenue sharing like in the NFL, where teams like Indianapolis, Tampa Bay, small markets, have the ability to compete anyway.
Yeah, I think it is. Revenue sharing does help them compete. I have other problems with revenue sharing. I think it tends to depress salaries in a strange way. That's maybe aside from my paper. I'm running a paper about that right now, though, where for example, look at baseball with a free agent. Now that Kansas City is basically getting over half of its available money from the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. Who really owns the Royals? If the Yankees and Red Sox are paying more, they are paying more than half of their money. So, but anyway, so the Yankees are funding the Royals to bid against their players. So, in one conception, right, there are more bidders for these free agents, and therefore salaries would go up because Kansas City can now plausibly and does bid against the Red Sox. But the problem is as we marginally impoverish the Yankees and luxury tax them, and more importantly the Red Sox, right, as we impoverish them, then the top end of the bids go down. You see, and the Red Sox can barely afford that poor Japanese pitcher I heard, but theoretically anyway, so theory only, the top end of the revenue stream goes down, and so some agents, I kind of know a bunch of them. Some agents are very happy with revenue sharing because it does create more bidders, right? Because it creates a better market for the middle level player. But some agents, the high end ones, are very unhappy with revenue sharing because it tends to, in luxury tax especially, because it tends to comparatively diminish the bid of the Yankees for the top end player. So, but your point is exactly right. Revenue sharing is there are other solutions to try to buttress up the Kansas City Royals of the leagues.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have another sort of criticism about your point about integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, integrity means more than winning at all costs.
Right.
It means winning because you love to win or because you love playing the sport.
Mm-hmm.
So. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Like when I watch something like horse racing, I think about money and betting, and that seems to be what's underlying the purpose of it. And I don't want to, think about that when I'm watching a sport that I love, and I also think that would take away from the players.
Right.
When you're deciding whether or not to dive for a catch, you don't want to make a little cost-benefit analysis right there.
Yeah, the dying would be a pretty easy cost-benefit, but yeah, you should dive or die. Dive. Oh, sorry.
Dive.
I thought you said die. I can pass on that.
We had the dive.
Yeah, we don't pay them enough for that, but yeah, that's a great point about integrity. And what I was trying to do in the paper is figure out what do the leagues mean by what they call competitive integrity, right?
Well,
and I was trying to align incentives with what we desire and mean by integrity. But
No, I think what they mean is that they're trying to, this is the market right here. This is the person's living room that they want to get into. They want him to watch baseball. They want him to buy their stuff and attend the games. And if there's any hint that there's a lack of integrity, as he defines it in the game, then he's not going to spend his money. That's where the teams are oriented.
yeah, I don't know.
This is the market right here.
I don't know. Does it trouble us when Tiger Woods stands over a putt and the announcer says if he makes this putt, he goes from second to first and wins an additional, they announce the prize money. I mean, I kind of enjoy that. I love when the announcers tell us exactly how much money is at stake on a putt. And now when we watch league sports, right, I mean, any fan who's more than casual is going to know, like, okay, Mark Blount just got this huge contract, or in the NFL, like with most contracts are paid up front, right? So-and-so just got a huge performance bonus up front. So his reservation price is basically huge. He didn't care, right? Because he's already got his money for the next 3 or 4 years. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it ruins sports that there might be money on the line. I think and to me, it makes them more rich. I mean, fans have a tremendous consumption preference for financial sports. People bet on sports. People have fantasy leagues, which are organized bets on sports. Right? So people seem to enjoy financial aspects of sports quite a bit. So I don't know if we get different fans or more fans. I would tune in more happily if I knew players were. I mean, imagine the post-game celebration where the winning team is jumping around with greenbacks in his hand. I mean, look at that. What a dance that would be. And the losing team gets nothing. I mean, that's what I want to see. Pay the bets off.
Unless they bet on the other team.
I want to see immediate post-game payoff. That would be sports. Well, look at golf. The guy stands there with a check. Do you tune in? I mean, I'm not you, but I mean, we tune in there. I tune into golf. It helps. I nap. I forgot that.
Well, first, in regard to that statement, I mean, they did sort of try that amongst everything else that failed with the XFL.
Yeah.
Was the pay-to-play
Right.
business.
That was the beauty of it. The
Yeah.
players were killing themselves. I mean, really, if we had betting regimes, imagine you have to double national security, you have to have doctors on. I mean, imagine football, NFL football with winner take all. The players would be killing each other to win that game.
I mean, I had two other points, and kind of the first one surrounded smaller. I guess there seems to be this assumption on perfect information, which I suppose in the NFL and for the Super Bowl, there would be that quick market correction should the players on the Patriots catch wind of a shoulder injury. But coming from a school that has never made the NCAA tournament yet, was probably involved in the biggest point shaving scandal in college basketball history, Northwestern. There are those markets that don't operate with perfect information,
Right.
and will never, just because there will never be enough money to sustain that type of market. So would you require this type of system to be capped for, maybe your big four leagues and not into your minor league baseball where, through gambling, the incentives are enormous compared to the salary?
Well, I do write about professional sports. I purposely excluded college athletics, just because I had to. But as far as limiting it or whatever, I don't know. I think if a minor league baseball team, tries to somehow place some huge monster bet and losing in a game, I don't think there'd be a huge market, first of all, for those kind of bets, but it'd be very hard to get somebody to take that bet. And that could exist. I mean, again, the incentives are always compared. I mean, look at today. If you're better off today, if you're one who's a pro athlete and B, intent on shirking bets, intent on cheating, I'd rather have today's regime, which prohibits bets where you can call some friend of a friend of a friend who placed some bet and shock, like Nevada, when you win. But even Nevada, I mean, which is just one state, tracks its bets very carefully. And those gambling scandals, the one, when you mentioned the one at Arizona State, were discovered by the bookies long before the feds got involved. The bookies saw it coming. In fact, they would shut down the bets in the Arizona State. They shut the bets off. What's this money coming from? They saw something out of whack. They know.
To your point that kind of one of the reasons for instituting the betting regime would be that, Iverson is incentivized to score because that's what his salary is based on. I mean, couldn't you just, have GMs be smart enough to realize what are the factors that actually make a winning player, kind of like the whole sabermetrics Moneyball revolution in baseball, where they're realizing that, hey, the way we're compensating players isn't their actual true worth to their value towards a winning team.
Right.
So couldn't you correct, Iverson's propensity to jack up shots by, paying him for assists? I mean,
Right.
wouldn't that be an easier way?
Yeah, and it's back on the Moneyball thing. Even though the last 10 years or so, that baseball is recognized or whatever, that other measures other than homers, right, are important to compensating the player. Even today, even despite all that information and the way you can say Moneyball and you and I know what you're talking about, right? Despite all that, home runs, batting average are still the main predictors of a player's pay, of non-pitcher's pay. You see, so even all that we know about the importance of walks and of bunts or whatever in baseball still has not translated speaking as a matter of data, has not translated into salary. Now, in the NBA, yes, they try to do that, but as much as they talk about the importance and coaches look for those kind of a player like Shane Battier out of this school, right, who's very good at those little things, he's paid well, but he'd be paid a lot more if he was putting down 25 points a game. I mean, the data just shows that. So he just stop setting picks. Just shoot the ball. Shoot every time he gets the ball. He can make a lot more money. I'm going to write him a letter after this is over to tell him that.
I see two instead of misalignments that this betting scheme could create, and I was hoping you could maybe comment on them for me. They both have to do with the idea of creating optimal performance for the players. First, it seems like if you don't necessarily want to win every game. Now, you mentioned this when you were speaking, but if it's the middle of July and your baseball team maybe up 3 runs or something like that, you don't necessarily want your star center fielder going into the wall every single time a ball's hit into the outfield, because there's a very long season and that game's marginal benefit is very slim compared to a playoff game. So, but if that player has $10,000 on the line for that game, he's going to go into that wall. So that I see that one problem. And then the second problem is similar to that. If Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade have a side bet going on about who's going to score the most points in a game, do you necessarily want them going out there doing everything they can to maximize their scoring if it's a 20 or 30 point differential in the game and all they're going to do is end up getting hurt and harm the team's long run potential?
Well, I'll start with the second point. Good points, great points. I don't think that the individual bets would ever be inimical to the team bet. I'll use an example from golf, right, where golfers will bet on the outcome. They'll also bet on birdies or sandy pars or close to the pin, right? And all of these betting aspects that are side bets, individual side bets, all of them conduce to team victory, And so it may well be that I can see Tom Brady and Peyton Manning betting on what? On who had more completions? Now, that would give incentives to throw short passes, even if the team needed long passes, right? So therefore they wouldn't make that bet, or they'd be less likely to make that bet. If it was this bet, it'd be a small bet in comparison to the team bet, because otherwise they're betting against their own team bet. You see, it would make no sense. It'd make no sense for a golfer to put down the large money on the team bet, $100 or whatever on the team bet, and then bet $5 on like who hit more balls out of bounds. You're like, well, you're going to win $5 and lose 100? Sure, hit them all out of bounds. You win, right? So I think it's possible that, but I think players would be very loath to engage in any side bets that would hurt their main action. And on the first point about, you'll go too crazy early on, well, that's what the size of the bet will do, right? We want players to go into the wall, sometimes, even in June, right? But sometimes not. And so under the current regime, the players are all screwed up. Some of them are playing for the salary. They're on a salary drive year. They're going to go into every wall. Other players got the big contract. They're going to play for the long term. Bets help everyone get on the same page. A little more for the long termers, a little less for the short termers. You know what I'm saying? Helps keep everybody, helps line up. It's much more easy for the owners to manage player incentives by basically amending what I call the reservation price. So I don't have a complete answer to your question, but I think that's what I'm trying to say. Go ahead, you want to rejoin, I think.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
There was, I think, 2 last questions, and then we'll,
About your point in baseball, this can be applicable to any sport, but as far as home runs determining salary, don't you think that's a large part of what the owner's revenue maximization, that's what fans want, so they're paying for that behavior? And the same thing in basketball. Yeah, Iverson puts up 30 points a game, but he's not really paid because he puts up 30 points a game. He's paid because Philly owner wants to keep him in town because that's what keeps the fans coming through the door. So I kind of feel like there's a disconnect between what you're saying there, and then just an unrelated point. How much of these problems as far as reservation would be solved by eliminating guaranteed money? Whereas the NFL, I think few people could argue that the league's better off than the NBA because there is no guaranteed contracts. I mean, there's guaranteed money, but in the NFL, you don't put out 1 year, you could just as easily get cut the next. Whereas in the NBA, you have Mark Blount, contract here, Vince Carter, contract here, he puts up a huge year, he gets that money, he's got no incentives, you're right. In the NFL, it doesn't exist.
Right.
So, I mean, how much of that can be solved in that manner?
Right. Yeah, great questions. Golf is the best sport of all. I have that footnoted, I think, somewhere. But it's the best sport of all because, the players, they don't play, they don't get paid. So players, when they do play, they'll go all out. Now, seeing a golfer exert himself is, I don't know what that means. But anyway, they're going all out in golf terms to try to win. NFL, yeah, there's certainly incentives because they're shorter contracts, right? Players have much more incentive to go all out. But maybe in NFL, they go too far out. You see what I'm saying? Because players can get cut week to week. Rookies trying to make the team. So players, breaking their arms and getting creamed out there, because they might be over-incentivized to win. They might have too much integrity in the NFL. Maybe, I don't know, the NBA, which, pitchers in baseball with, 6 or 7 year contracts, they're going to rest every little glitch in their elbow. So, the NFL is good. I mean, there are more incentives with no guaranteed contracts, but you want players to have some reservation price so they'll tell the coach rather when they're hurting. NFL, they're notorious for not even telling the coach that they're sore. The coach send them out there with cracked ribs or whatever, just crazy stuff like that. So the reservation price can be too extreme sometimes. So you want to balance it just right. On your first point about stars and fans and stuff like that, it's kind of weird, but a lot of data has shown that, believe it or not, stars do not draw fans, even in the NBA, at home. Allen Iverson draws fans on the road, but winning draws fans at home. It's winning teams, no matter who, a bunch of Shane Battiers, whatever, who are unglamorous, pick setters. If they win, they'll draw lots of fans. But Allen Iverson or Wally Zerbiak just chucking up shots left and right, whatever, no matter what the percentage is. I guess they draw fans on the road. People want to come in there and try these impossible circus shots and miss them, I guess. I don't know what it is, but stars draw more on the road. Now local teams do participate a little bit in the gate revenue. They get part of that, percentages back. So there is some incentive to employ the stars, but they would make a ton more money by employing winning players. So I don't know. I mean, it's counterfactual. It's ahistorical. Edmund Burke is wrong. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Last question.
It's a little bit complicated, but I feel like we've learned in sports that if it can happen, it probably will happen at some point. So, like, say you have a dominant team one year. You make the playoffs. The 1 seed is playing the 8. And some players on the 8th seed, they're down a little bit for the year. They've made some stupid bets. Their team hasn't played very well. They make the requisite team bet, $5, our team's going to win. But they put most of their money on the side bet, on the sure thing that the 1 seed's going to kick their ass. But so I guess I'm worried about the integrity of the game. Like, what if the 8th seed gives the number 1 seed a run for their money, but yet the 8th seed's got all their money really riding on losing? Because it was such a sure thing, they made that bet. They needed the money.
Right.
And I feel like that really harms the integrity of the competition. Because if the 1 seed wins, then you're thinking, well, did they throw it? Did they just not be able? Were they unable to hold on to the lead? Like, what happened?
Right.
And
well, you must not watch any sports then, because that worry is even amplified now. Right. Because right now, when the eighth seed, whatever, is facing number 1 team, I mean, I guess the easier thing to do would be put a huge bet out there right now to lose. And then have them lose. Or even the easiest thing is to pay off the referees, which actually happened not too long ago in Italy, the soccer referees, bribery. But, and I know some referees in the NBA are paid off. No, but I think they are. I've watched a couple games this year. So I don't know. I mean, you're right. The 8th team could bet against itself. But my thesis is, if they're going to do that, do it today, but you can make a ton of money. And as far as the size of the team bet goes, it's going to have to be substantial. You got entourage to take care of. You got house payments, a couple of house. I mean, there's a lot of people to take care of for the modern, Major League Baseball star or whatever. And so, I think the team bets would have to be pretty substantial. The player's going to want substantial revenue. They want to capitalize on their ability. In other words, their name means something in the capital markets, right? So they can capitalize on that, and I'd be shocked if they didn't.
Well, thank you, Professor Standen. This has been, fun.